In today's video, I want to begin to help you apply your knowledge of the major scale, its interval structure, which we've covered a lot of, and begin to apply that to your understanding of chords. Chords beyond shapes. That's specifically what I want to look at in this video, and we'll do that right after this. Okay, as usual, I do have my tea. Always have my tea when I'm teaching. Ask any of my students. It just makes me feel good, makes me think clearly. It's good for my throat. Okay, so welcome. If you're new to this series of lessons that I've been giving, this is a series called Where Stuff Comes From, and it's my attempt to help guitarists better understand how things in music are connected, especially, of course, as they relate to the guitar. And the reason I'm doing it is because I see, even among my own students, a lot of disconnection between information that is out there, lots of information out there on how to play, how to do this, how that technique works. All of that is out there, typically on the interweb. And what I'm finding is students are not necessarily connecting these ideas together in a manner that helps them understand what's really going on in a big global picture. And so they seem to be forever frustrated in their efforts to feel like they're progressing. So I just decided I'd put together this series of PDFs. We're at number 6 now, and with them these videos that goes along with them. And so for today's session, what I wanted to talk about is to finally, after having spent quite a bit of time working with the structure of the major scale, the natural notes that lie on the fretboard, where they're located, how to locate them, and the interval structure of the major scale. All of that stuff together as a package of information can serve us really well, not only as musicians but guitarists, to help us understand how things lay out on the fretboard so that you're not just stuck trying to remember shapes only, because when you look down on the fretboard, all you see are strings and frets. And a lot of students, that's for a lot of people, that's all they see are strings and frets. And then they have to remember where fingers go. And there's no discussion of essentially the note knowledge layout of the fretboard. They don't have a mental map of that. And so that's where we're currently at. This is what I want to begin exploring and getting some clarification on. So in this video, I'm actually now beginning to apply the knowledge that we've built up so far to chords, to help us understand chords. It's a good starting point for many players. It's how we all probably started to play the guitar, with a handful of chords, and played some songs, and all is well. If you haven't seen the previous videos, I'll put links to them in the notes below, and also links for you to get access to any of the mentioned PDFs that belong in those videos. You can get them for free. Just leave me your best email address and I'll send them off to you, no problem. So here's where it all started. I would ask a student, somebody who's probably been playing for a while and they've just come to the studio to get some extra learning going, to play me a D chord. And it probably doesn't take you a long time to guess what D chord they play. It's our good old friend, the D major in, this position. Second position, you could call it. I call it open position because it's got a mixture of open and fretted notes. So to me, it's an open position D chord. And so that's the default one for a lot of people. Easy to learn, quick to memorize, it sticks, and I get that. Then I'll ask them this: play me another D chord. Well, you get the deer eyes in the headlights at night. It's just like, oh. Some people will go, I didn't even know there was another type of a D chord. Others will say, no, I have no clue where I could play it. And typically the answer is, it's because I don't know the shape of it. So what I wanted to try to do is get people past shape, because guitarists really do get stuck on it. It's as if when they look down at the fretboard, really truly all they see are strings and frets, and ultimately chord shapes or scale patterns. You can get a lot of technical stuff accomplished knowing that, if you're good at remembering and you're good at bringing those elements together to make some good sounding music, even without an understanding of how the fretboard lays out. But what we're dealing with here, what I want for you guys, is a longer view of the benefit for you of knowing how things work on the fretboard. And especially in this particular PDF, issue number 6, it helps you understand how you can create more versions, let's say, of a D chord without ever having seen them before, because you understand their architecture. I'm not going to go specifically in this video into how chords are built. We're doing that in the next video. But I'm just going to skim over the construction of a D chord to use as a starting point to get your mind thinking on this, and then we'll move into the official how do you build chords, where do they come from video in the next episode. Okay, so there's the D chord that everybody loves to play, and the question is, can you find other D chords? Well, here's the application side of what you've been studying so far to this issue. When you make a D chord and look down upon it, again, what do you see? Is your brain, is your mind seeing an arrangement of fingers that take on a certain shape, that sit on certain strings and inside certain frets? Is that what you see? And if so, good, that's a starting point. What I see when I look down on a D, or any chord for that matter, is I see the notes that make it up. Why is that important? Well, let me show you why. I'm going to assume to some extent that you're building up your knowledge of the fretboard. You're working on it. It's a bit of an ongoing task, so it doesn't happen overnight. That you're getting familiar with where at least the note structures exist, perhaps up to the 5th fret. That's a good place to start. And again, you can reference that in earlier videos in the series where we talk about that whole process of learning some notes on the fretboard and seeing it from that point of view. But when I look down at this thing, I see a D note under my 3rd finger. I see an F sharp under my 2nd, and I see an A under my 1st. And of course, if I'm also including the 4th string open, I've got my standard 4-string D major chord, again, that everybody loves and often defaults to. If I wanted to learn more D chords, commonly people will look them up in reference chord encyclopedias, 1,001 chords in one book. Pictures are valuable, but if they're only showing you shapes and fingers, you're really missing out on a much deeper and more valuable piece of information that's going to help you figure this out more easily without a lot of memorizing. So the piece that's missing is, do you know the notes on your fretboard, or at least you're beginning to get comfortable with that, and knowing the notes of the D chord. For this video, I'm just telling you what the notes are. I'm not telling you where they came from. We do that in the next video. So the notes that make up a D chord are D, F sharp, and A. That's it. 3 notes. You can add to it. You can make it into a 7th chord if you want later. or a dominant 7. It's a different chord, but it's the same thinking. But D itself, the little chord we all love, is just made out of 3 notes, D, F sharp, and A. Now here's the thing. I want to make more D chords. Well, you have 2 options, really. You could be shown another D chord. There's one. Here's one. Here's one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another. 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 They're everywhere. They don't look like the D chord you first got exposed to, the one that really stuck in your mind. They take on different shapes. Now, you might get intimidated by all those D chord possibilities because your mind is thinking, oh my, there are so many shapes to memorize. And that would be true. You would have to do that a few at a time, right? And over time, you will learn some more shapes. But there's, to me, a more connected way of doing it that helps you always reference back to information you studied earlier. That's the whole purpose of the Where Stuff Comes From series, to help you get good at something new, having been exposed to something before, and you're going to make a connection between the two. Well, let's assume that you're already comfortable with a D major scale. I'm just doing this on one string. I haven't even started talking about moving across strings yet. This is just done on one string so that you can see the structure of it and get used to the sound of it. And if you've been following the series, once you know already that once you can play the scale based on the interval structure, tones, tones, semitones, tone, 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 semitone. Once you get that, you come back and then try to identify the notes of the scale. Well, here they are. And this is all drafted up in the PDF. Again, if you want to get it, it's free for you. Just give me your best email and I'll get that to you pronto. So we've got a D, an E, an F sharp, a G, an A, a B, a C sharp, and a D. That's the scale of D major. What we're going to do to build the D major chord is pull out the D note, any D note, it doesn't matter, but I'm pulling out this one. And then we're going to pull out the F sharp, and then the A. So that combination of notes makes up a chord when you play them all at the same time. When I take those 3 notes, D, F sharp, and A, and perhaps reassemble them here in our good old buddy, D, F sharp, A. Now I want to know another D chord. Well, it's not really that difficult. I just have to look for those same 3 notes anywhere else on the fretboard, bring them together in some cluster under my fingers, and behold, I have a new D chord. So let's take a look at this process. What if I played the D here and an A there? I know it's hard to see it on the fretboard, and then I'm going to reach down onto the 6th string for the F sharp. That's a D chord. It's a very nice sounding one. Another D chord might be same D, put the F sharp here instead, and then the A there. Or maybe I'll go and grab this D, and that F sharp, and that A. All the shapes are changing. This is what's cool. But I'm not having to memorize the shapes. I just need to keep referencing the notes. And of course, I need to have a pretty good knowledge of where those notes lie on the fretboard. That's the part that often stumps the student. They realize that learning that bit takes time. And so it's a bit of a slow go at first. But over time, like any craft, like any skill, if you're consistent with this, you get better at it. You're wired to get better at it. How about this one? Here's a D, an F sharp on the 2nd string, and an A on the 4th string. That little cluster is a D chord. How about this one? There's a D on the 1st string, F sharp on the 3rd, A on the 2nd. I could fill it out a little bit further and it starts to look like the shape of an F chord. But it's played really high up here. Sometimes even that throws students off. What about this one, way up here? I've got D, F sharp, A. It's exactly the same shape as the one we love and cherish, but it's a whole octave higher. That's the only time that I will come across the same shape of D on those same strings as I move across up and down those strings. I won't have another one that shape until I reach that position. The point here is that all of those chords were constructed not by memorizing shapes, but by knowing notes. Now I'm going to stretch this a bit further. By the way, all those chords that I just played, they're located in the PDF if you want access to them. Some of them are more practical than others. That's always the case. So those chords are available in the PDF if you want to explore them. But check this out. Now I'm just randomly doing this. This is not a planned chord hunt, shall we say. So I'm going to find, I know the notes, D, F sharp, and A. Let's do something funky. Here's a D on the 3rd string. Set the 3rd string, 7th fret. Let's go and hunt for an F sharp that's in a weirdly located place. How about the 4th string, 4th fret? The missing note now is an A. I could hit the open 5th string A, and here's my chord. That's a D. It's not a strummable one around the campfire as easily as that guy is, but nonetheless, it's still a D. Or add another A on the 1st string at the 5th fret. Or, sorry, instead of playing the open A, I could play the fretted A at the 5th string. Lots of possibilities here. Let's do another one. Let's do an F sharp right here. Let's do an A here and a D here. Look at this. Now, if you can see that, right? That's a weird looking shape. Again, it's not particularly strummable. I'm a little out of tune, it sounds too. Little intonation issue going on, okay? But nonetheless, it's still a D chord. And so that's the value of knowing the notes that make up the chord. You let essentially the notes that make it up create the shape for you. Instead of having this overwhelming sense of, oh my gosh, there's just so many chords to remember and so many shapes of any one chord to remember, just don't do it. Just know the notes that make it up. We cover that in the next video. And start to apply your growing knowledge of where notes are on the fretboard, so you have a mental map of how the fretboard is working, so that you're able to create a chord. And just like scales had formulas, just like our tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone thing, chords have formulas too. And I'll talk about that in the following video. Because there's a big part of talking about chords using that knowledge. So, at the end of the day, I'm just going to show you this here. At the end of the day, there are the series of chords that you can muck around with. The top layer shows the shapes of chords that you would have to remember if you were forced to, and the bottom one shows you the exact same chords with only 3 notes that get applied to each one, which is much easier to do. So the big takeaway from all this, and for some of you this would be a revelation, for others you already know this because you studied this stuff, when it comes to chords, even though for guitarists often, for the longest time, they see chords as shapes, they often don't realize that the actual chord or chords they're playing come from scales. For some, that's a big, big revelation, just to get that. So the connection now becomes all the work you did studying the major scale is going to begin to set you up to understand chords in a more connected way, as opposed to there are chords and there are scales, and there are modes, and there are, all these different bits. They're all related. So we've got the major scale and a good understanding of it that's leading us into an understanding of chords. And again, we're going to use that information to help you understand how chords are built. And we're just going to keep on going from there. And you will find, ultimately, with any concept that gets introduced, no matter how difficult it may seem on the surface, your ability to understand it and learn it quickly will always be referenced back to some earlier foundational material. That's what we're focused on. So, if you know the notes of a particular chord, in this case D, the shapes, the multiple ways you could play the D, will unfold before your eyes if you know where the notes are that make it up. And you go and find them on the fretboard and you end up with new shapes. So I hope that helps you understand some of the beginning connections we're going to be making between all the stuff we did with the major scale and some practical musical concepts, in this case, seeing chords not just as strings and frets and fingers, but also the notes that underlie what you see. Very important, because that's where everything else comes from. I hope that makes sense. So once again, if you want to get access to the PDF that's mentioned in this video, you can click the link in the notes below and I'll get you the access to it. Just give me your best email. If you found the video useful, valuable, go ahead, leave me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on this topic. We'll see you in the next installment of Where Stuff Comes From. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio. Bye.